What if the wounds you can't see? What if those are the ones that haunt you the most? Imagine growing up in a house where, well, your voice just didn't matter, where love felt like a switch, on one day, completely off the next. For some people, this isn't just childhood stuff. This becomes the actual blueprint for their entire life, and it often leads to something really complex, often misunderstood, something called borderline personality disorder.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Today, we're really digging into something incredibly personal, but also really far reaching. How our earliest experiences, those childhood scars, sometimes obvious, sometimes subtle, can shape the landscape of borderline personality disorder, or BPD. We're sort of pulling back the curtain here using insights from some really powerful work, specifically excerpts from Childhood Scars and Borderline Personality Disorder, and particularly the section When Childhood Scars Become Emotional Storms, Understanding BPD. Our journey today is all about understanding how these invisible wounds, well, they don't just leave a mark, they can fundamentally rewire our emotional lives.
Absolutely. And our mission here for you listening is really to move beyond maybe a surface level idea of BPD. We want to extract those key insights that reveal the why behind the what, helping you grasp the really nuanced interplay between what happens early in life and how BPD can develop. So by diving deep into the source material, we're aiming to offer a much clearer picture, a more empathetic one, hopefully, highlighting not just the struggles, but also the very real pathways to understanding and ultimately healing.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. Our source material, it kind of drops us right into this really compelling narrative, an emotionally gripping story about a character that brings this whole topic to life.
Yeah, Anna's story. As we get into her journey, it's really striking how powerfully it illustrates these early dynamics we're talking about. So let me tell you about Anna. Her experiences, which are sadly quite common, really serve as a poignant example of the BPD journey. Picture this. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, right? She bursts through the door after school, super eager to share something, maybe a great drawing, or maybe something mean someone said on the playground. She runs to her mom, full of all that kid energy and emotion. But instead of getting that warm, engaged response, she gets, well, a distracted nod, a quick dismissal. Mommy's busy, or that's nice, dear. The consistent message she's getting, her internal world, her feelings, they're secondary, or maybe even kind of a nuisance. And this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern that really started to shape how Anna understood her own emotions.
When she cried, showing sadness or maybe fear, she was often told she was just too sensitive or she needed to toughen up. Her natural emotional responses were just invalidated systematically. And if she ever dared to show anger, which is a totally normal human emotion, right? She'd get sharply reprimanded, told to stop being dramatic, or that good girls don't get angry. Can you just imagine the constant, insidious message she was internalizing? Your feelings are wrong. Your emotions are a burden. Your real self, not okay. So by the time she's a teenager, Anna's carrying what our source calls this invisible wound. And it wasn't just a feeling, it was this deeply ingrained belief system. She truly believed her feelings were just inherently wrong, that her needs were basically an imposition of other people. And maybe most profoundly, that love wasn't something freely given. It was something she had to constantly fight for, earn it, prove she was worthy. This isn't just a minor insecurity we're talking about. It's like a fundamental distortion in how a child sees themselves, their value, the whole nature of connection. It's basically a blueprint for, well, relational chaos later on.
Right. And what's truly fascinating here, and what our source really clarifies, is how Anna's early experiences, they directly illustrate the core dynamics of BPD. Not just the surface symptoms. Her struggles weren't simply moodiness or her being dramatic, as people might have casually dismissed it. No, the material makes it explicit. This was BPD, and it was shaped meticulously by years of that chronic emotional invalidation and childhood trauma. The research discussed in our source, it actually highlights how these kinds of experiences can literally alter neural pathways during those critical developmental stages. It affects the brain's ability to regulate emotion later in life. So you see, it's a physiological scar as much as it is an emotional one. It creates this incredibly intense, almost hypersensitive internal world, but without the internal tools to manage it. This really pushes us beyond just labels, doesn't it? To understand the deep, even neurobiological roots of that emotional dysregulation.
Wow. Yeah, a physiological scar. That's powerful. And, well, as you might guess, This invisible wound deeply impacted Anna's adult relationships. Our source talks about how her adult life just became this series of intense emotional storms. She slept fiercely with this incredible, almost desperate intensity. But this huge capacity for connection was constantly overshadowed by an even bigger, debilitating fear of abandonment. And that fear, often subconsciously, it just drove her actions. One minute, she'd idolize someone, put them on this impossibly high pedestal, convinced they were the answer, the key to her happiness or security. The next minute, sometimes in a really rapid, bewildering, and often impulsive shift, she'd push them away, terrified they were going to hurt her first if she didn't, strike preemptively. It's like watching someone trying so hard to connect, but they're also constantly bracing for impact. So looking at Anna's journey, what specific elements really scream BPD, diagnostically speaking, beyond just that fear of abandonment?
That's a crucial question. So beyond that intense fear of abandonment, Anna's story really illustrates that hallmark idealization and devaluation cycle, the splitting, where individuals rapidly shift between seeing others as all good or all bad. This often comes from an inability to integrate both the positive and the negative aspects of themselves and other people, which is often a direct consequence of those fragmented attachment experiences in childhood. Makes sense, right? The source also kind of hints at the chronic feelings of emptiness and identity disturbance. I mean, if your core emotional experiences were constantly invalidated growing up, how do you form a coherent sense of self? Your sense of who you are becomes deeply tangled up with how others see you or react to you. It leads to a really unstable self-image. So yeah, it's not just a mood swing. It's a fundamental crisis of identity and emotional regulation, directly stemming from that blueprint of pain established so early on.
That's a really clear and detailed explanation, connecting those early experiences right to the full spectrum of BPD symptoms. And the material is very clear that Anna's story, as moving as it is, it's nowhere near an isolated incident. This isn't just about one person's struggle. It's a much broader, more universal problem that really needs our attention and, well, our understanding.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's clear Anna's experience echoes countless others. The research in our source highlights this stark reality. Studies show that a significant number of people with BPD experience some form of childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And that could be abuse, neglect, or even, as the source puts it, the quiet wound of emotional dismissal. It's really critical to emphasize that trauma isn't always, the big T trauma, overt physical or sexual abuse or gross neglect. Often it's that chronic absence of emotional mirroring, the constant invalidation of a child's inner world, or maybe unpredictable caregiving that leaves a child feeling perpetually unsafe, misunderstood. Think of it like a subtle but persistent drought, an emotional nourishment drought. This kind of relational trauma can be just as damaging, sometimes more insidious than the more obvious forms, especially for the developing brain and its ability to form secure attachments.
Right. So it's not just the big, obvious traumas, but these repeated, almost quiet micro traumas of emotional invalidation. That makes sense. And here's where it gets really heartbreaking, as the material explains. So many individuals grow up genuinely believing they are broken. They internalize all those messages. They see their intense emotions, their chaotic relationships, maybe their desperate attempts to self-soothe as personal failings, as inherent flaws in them. It's like they were given a faulty compass right from the start and then blamed for getting lost all the time. What does our source say about the implications of reframing this? Not just for the person, but for, say, support systems or even how clinicians approach treatment.
That's a critical point, and the material addresses it directly. This perspective, it completely reframes the narrative, doesn't it? From one of personal failing to one of profound developmental impact. It argues that when we understand BPD not as some kind of moral failing, but as a complex coping strategy developed in response to overwhelming early experiences, well, that shifts the entire paradigm of treatment. For individuals, just that understanding can be incredibly validating. It can be the very first step towards self-compassion. And for clinicians, it means moving beyond just managing symptoms to actually addressing the underlying trauma and those attachment wounds. The reality, as our source clarifies, is far more complex and ultimately more compassionate. Individuals with BPD were, quote, simply never given the tools to regulate emotions, trust love, or feel safe in their own skin. They just never learned how to navigate the very emotional storms that were brewing inside them because of what happened early on. This perspective really demands a trauma-informed approach, where the question fundamentally shifts from what's wrong with you to what happened to you.
Wow. That is a massive shift in perspective, and one that holds so much potential for healing, doesn't it? It really challenges us to rethink our assumptions. Okay, so we've explored the deep origins of this pain. It's a lot to take in, but our source doesn't just leave us there, thankfully. It offers a really powerful message of hope. It points directly towards pathways for healing, and that's so critical for anyone grappling with these experiences. But here's the truth, it states. BPD is not a life sentence. Healing is possible.
Mm-hmm.
That feels profoundly optimistic, offering light in what can seem like a very dark and intractable situation. It's almost like, our brains get this faulty wiring installed in childhood, and then we spend our adult lives desperately trying to find the instruction manual to fix it, which, thankfully, our source suggests actually does exist.
Exactly. The material points directly to effective therapies, with dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, often being, well, a cornerstone of healing. As many listeners probably know, DBT is specifically designed to tackle these challenges. It offers a really comprehensive skill set. But what our source particularly emphasizes, beyond just the core skills like, say, emotional regulation and distress tolerance, is how DBT directly counters that pervasive sense of invalidation from childhood. How? Well, by validating the intensity of the patient's emotional experience, acknowledging, yes, your feelings are real, and often they make sense given your past, while simultaneously pushing for change and new behaviors. It's a profound dialectic, really. It teaches these essential skills to calm the emotional storms, skills that someone like Anna just never had the chance to learn as a child. These aren't just coping mechanisms. They are fundamental tools for building, as DBT puts it, a life worth living.
That distinction feels really key. Validating the experience, but still guiding towards change. It sounds like DBT helps people build the very internal infrastructure that was maybe missing or damaged in childhood. Are there specific aspects of DBT or maybe other therapies mentioned the material highlights as being especially transformative for people dealing with these really deep-seated childhood scars?
Absolutely. So beyond the core modules, mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, interpersonal effectiveness, the material really underscores the importance of the therapeutic relationship itself within DBT. Think about it. For someone who's known chronic invalidation, having a therapist who is consistent, validating, but also gently challenging, that can be profoundly corrective. It actually models secure attachment and healthy boundaries, something many have never, ever experienced. The source also briefly touches on trauma-focused therapies, usually once a baseline of stability is there. Things like EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing, which can be crucial for processing specific traumatic memories that often fuel BPD symptoms. With the right support and commitment to these therapies, the transformations can be truly remarkable. Individuals learn not just to build stable relationships, but crucially to trust, and maybe for the first time, to finally feel worthy of love. Imagine growing up, believing your feelings are wrong, your needs are a burden, and then finally discovering you can connect authentically, you can regulate yourself, and you can genuinely value yourself. It's a journey of profound rediscovery, really. Empowerment, breaking those generational cycles of emotional pain. The core message here is just undeniably powerful. The past may explain the pain, but it does not define the future.
And that really brings us right to the heart of this deep dive, doesn't it? This understanding, it's foundational. It's foundational for compassion, for progress, not just for those experiencing BPD, but for everyone in their lives too. So if you hear yourself in Anna's story, if those feelings of invalidation, that fear of abandonment, the emotional storms, or maybe the struggle to find a stable sense of self, if any of that resonates with your own experience, or, if someone you love carries these invisible scars, remember what our source says so clearly. They are not too much, and neither are you. That's such a powerful call for self-compassion and for understanding others too.
And this raises, I think, a really important question. What happens when we choose understanding over judgment? Because when we truly grasp the impact of these childhood experiences, when we recognize BPD as a legitimate, profound response to developmental trauma, we can stop labeling people. We stop calling them crazy or attention-seeking. Instead, we can start seeing them for who they really are. Survivors. Survivors of a storm they never asked to enter, who developed this set of intensely painful coping mechanisms just to navigate what felt like an unnavigable world. It fundamentally shifts our perspective, moving from blame to empathy, from fear to recognizing resilience, and recognizing the incredible capacity people have for healing.
It's a powerful shift, absolutely. One that could genuinely transform countless lives and relationships. Childhood may shape us, but healing. Well, healing is a story we get to write next. That's definitely a thought worth pondering.